BamaInsider.com, part of the Rivals.com network, joins us for his weekly Bama football recruiting report. Good morning, Bone.
Morning, Gary. How are you?
Doing great. This time last week, we were anticipating Joel Williams announcing a commitment on Monday, and more than likely to the Alabama Crimson Tide. Didn't happen. He has tabled that commitment date. What happened?
Yeah, not really sure. Just from speaking to a couple people, it seems like he just wasn't ready. He wanted to wait a little bit longer. It seemed like he'd been ready since about early June when Alabama offered him a scholarship after he attended their camp. He decommitted from Florida shortly after, came back to Tuscaloosa about maybe 2 weeks later for the cookout. And, ever since then, it just has seemed like it was pretty much a done deal for Alabama. Hasn't really visited anywhere else. Set the commitment date for September the 9th, which was his mom's birthday. And, we just kind of expected that was when it was going to happen. I think around probably Friday of last week, we started hearing maybe he wasn't going to commit. And then all of a sudden I guess it was on Sunday night when I heard officially, early Sunday evening, probably around 5 p.m., heard officially that it was not going to happen. I still think he's going to end up at Alabama. I still think Alabama's in good shape. And this was not a situation where Alabama told him, hey, we need you to hold off for right now. We need to kind of see where, some other kids are going to end up going. Wasn't a situation like that at all. He's still a big time target for Alabama, and that's probably what a lot of people probably thought immediately when he delayed that decision, was that Alabama asked him to hold off, which is not the case at all. There is some situations where that is true, but not with Joel Williams. Joel Williams is a top target for them. They want him. They're ready for him to be a part of the class, and he just decided, all right, I'm gonna wait a little bit longer, and I think Alabama's willing to wait for him.
Ultimately, what's your guess on what happens with him? You think he does wind up in this 2020 class for the Crimson Tide?
I think he does. I think he may want to take a few more visits. I think he may, possibly, take a trip up to Kentucky, maybe one out to Houston. LSU's still recruiting him a little bit, but I think ultimately he ends up in Alabama's class.
Okay, good deal. All right, let's move on. This past weekend, the first home game, a lot of visitors in for the New Mexico State contest. Any news come out of this past weekend's visits?
Well, not a ton of news. There was a lot of commitments that were on campus, but for the most part, there were some there were some 2021 kids that were on campus, including Hudson Wolf, who's a Rivals 100 tight end out of Savannah, Tennessee, not Savannah, Georgia, Savannah, Tennessee, Harding County High School. Big target for Alabama in the 2021 class. He was on campus, brought his entire family with him. Both his parents, sister, grandfather, and just a big family experience for him. I think it was about his fourth or fifth time in Tuscaloosa. Really has a good connection with the coaching staff. Had a great visit, really enjoyed it a lot. I think Alabama could be in the driver's seat early on for him, but obviously 2021, still a long way to go for him, but really liked it a lot. We saw some other kids that were on campus this weekend, like Quandarius Robinson, Jackson Bratton, Malachi Moore, a lot of commitments that were on campus. Another former commitment that was on campus was Dazzlin Worsham, the four-star wide receiver out of Hewitt-Trussville. He was on campus. He told us last week that he was probably going to make a decision in early October. Has the top two of Alabama and Miami. And a lot of people remember back in June when he decommitted from Alabama. A lot of people thought that he was going to announce for Miami a couple days later, because he decommitted shortly after a trip down to Coral Gables. Had a good time down there, and I just don't think Alabama has really pressed for him that hard ever since then. So I think that he's eventually going to end up committing to Miami. If he does commit in October, I think he'll end up committing to Miami now. Will a spot potentially open up down the road in Tuscaloosa again for him? Maybe. But I think it would have to be when maybe some other receiver targets commit or say that they're solidly committed to the program where they're committed to, like Kashawn Boot, who is committed to LSU but still being recruited by Alabama. I think he would have to tell Alabama, "Hey, I'm 100% solid to LSU. I'm not really looking at you guys anymore." For Alabama to maybe start considering Worsham again.
Andrew Bone, Bama Insider Senior Recruiting Analyst, joining us for the Bama Football Recruiting Report. All right, let's get to some tidbits that you've got out there on BamaInsider.com. Big game Saturday, obviously, for Alabama, the SEC opener in Columbia against South Carolina, but it's also going to give Brian Baker a chance to watch five-star defensive end Jordan Burch play up there in South Carolina on Friday night. We know Alabama, really, like a lot of schools, would love to get this guy. He's one of the top players in the country. Opportunity for Baker to see him in person on Friday night. What's the latest with Burch? He seems to be a guy that plays it pretty close to the vest.
He sure is. I mean, I think most people are just guessing in terms of what he's going to do. He doesn't really tell anybody, "Hey, this school's leading," or "that school's leading." Anytime you do an interview with him, he doesn't really say a ton, so it's tough to decipher exactly what he's going to do. But we do know that Alabama's one of those schools that's on his short list, that he really likes Alabama a good bit, and not really any big surprise that Alabama's going to go see him play in Columbia on Friday night. I'm sure Brian Baker will probably spend some time at the high school as well. But major target for Alabama. I mean, they want Jordan Burch pretty bad. He's a top 4 overall player in the country. Alabama does not have a strong side defensive end currently committed in this class, so they've got a lot of attention on him and would really like to get him. But very tight battle right now with Georgia, Clemson, South Carolina, and then Alabama. I think those are probably his top 4 schools, and he will probably decide between one of those 4. But looking like he'll probably wait until signing day to make a decision. I'm not sure if that's going to be signing day in December or signing day in February, but we'll just have to all wait and see what he decides to do. But I definitely think that Alabama is a strong contender in the race for him.
Bone, I had an email yesterday from someone wanted me to ask you about a particular commitment, and they went into a little bit of detail about Jason Jones, and I've heard the same thing. They said that they're hearing Jones, Alabama may have cooled on him, the big defensive tackle out of Calera, and compared the situation to DJ Dale, who a lot of people, not a lot, but some people said, well, maybe he's not that good, and we see what he's done. What is the latest on Jason Jones? Is this a guy that's solidly part of this class? And big, huge, bulking, hulking defensive lineman who I guess also could play offensive tackle potentially in college. Is he firm as a commitment, and is Alabama firm with him?
I'll say this, DJ Dale last year, I think there was a lot of fans who were, especially people. There were a lot of people on our message board who were questioning DJ, and I think a lot of people just look at the rankings sometimes. Mm-hmm. They see all these 4- and 5-star commitments, and then they see 3-star next to someone's name, and they're like, "Oh, okay, well, this kid's probably going to get dropped." Well, DJ was a big-time commitment for Alabama, obviously, last year, and Alabama felt like he was so much better than his ranking, kind of like how Jamarian Latham is this year. Alabama thinks so highly of Jamarian Latham in this year's recruiting class that they think he could potentially make an impact as a true freshman. But on to Jones, Alabama, I would say I don't know if I would say cooled on him, but they have, probably haven't pressed as hard for him. That we see kids who are committed. A lot of people just kind of assume that when a kid commits, that Alabama kind of slows down recruiting them. Well, ask Quandarius Robinson or Drew Sanders or Roydell Williams if Alabama has slowed down recruiting them. But they talk to those guys, all the time. They recruit them kind of as if they're not committed. They recruit them all the way up until signing day. I don't know if that's really the case with Jason Jones. I think that he's been committed since the summer of 2018, and he tore his ACL last December. Just getting back onto the field this fall and having a pretty good season so far. But does he play on the defensive side of the ball? Can he play, or will he move over to the offensive side? Just not sure yet. And I don't know if Alabama's really sure what they want to do with him just yet. I think they're kind of just waiting around, maybe seeing what he wants to do. He's visited Georgia Tech several times. Seems like every day he posts something about Georgia Tech on his Twitter account. So it seems like Georgia Tech, maybe a few other schools, are pushing a little bit harder for him right now than Alabama is. So there may be a situation where we see him reopen down the road, but not ready to say it just yet. But it is something to keep an eye on for sure.
Okay, a guy that Alabama does want badly is Timothy Smith, the big defensive tackle out of the Sunshine State. But reading some of your recruiting thoughts at BamaInsider.com, and I hope I'm not reading too much into this, but it sounds like Florida is really going to battle on Smith, not go away here, and you seem, to me, based on what I read, a little bit concerned with the Gators threatening Alabama as a potential flip possibility for Smith. Am I right there?
Yeah, Florida's certainly a school that I would keep an eye on with Timothy Smith, because ever since he committed to Alabama, he hadn't made a trip back to Tuscaloosa. Now, he did commit in July, so there was only one opportunity for him to visit in July, and didn't come back up. So it wasn't like he just hasn't been to Tuscaloosa in forever. But he has visited Florida twice. Was in Gainesville this weekend. They're pressing hard for him. I mean, he's got some friends who are currently committed to Florida, and they're going to continue to recruit him. And he's likely going to return down to Gainesville one or two more times this year, and even an official visit. So, I think the biggest thing with Alabama is getting him back on campus, getting him comfortable with the coaching staff, continuing to recruit him. I think they've got one of the best guys recruiting him in Salson Siri. And, kind of like what Quandarius Robinson, told me months ago, it's really hard to say no to Salson Siri, and that was why he committed to Alabama. And I think Salson Siri can do a great job continuing to recruit Timothy Smith. And Timothy Smith, a big part of this recruiting class. So that's somebody that Alabama does not want to lose in this class. And as of right now, I still think Alabama holds on to him. But the more he visits Florida, the more you got to kind of watch out for it. But there are several other defensive linemen that are out there that Alabama's still recruiting. They've got a chance to land down the road. But you don't want to lose on a guy like Timothy Smith, because he can make a tremendous impact for your football program, even as a true freshman.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. All right, before we wrap, Bone, just any tidbits that you have for Alabama fans to watch for on the recruiting scene?
I would still kind of watch out for Joel Williams. Obviously, we're kind of just waiting to see, what may happen with him, down the road. In terms of, maybe some other guys popping anytime soon. I don't know if anything's really going to happen in the next, week or two. Now, maybe Jamil Burroughs. Jamil Burroughs, the four-star defensive tackle from McEachern High School in Powder Springs, Georgia, just recently decommitted from Georgia last week. A lot of signs pointing him towards Alabama. Not really sure when he's going to decide, but it could happen at any moment. It would not surprise me if it happened this week, but it could go a little bit further down the road. But I really like Alabama's chances in landing him. And then obviously we've talked about Eric Gilbert several times, the five-star tight end from Georgia, number one tight end in the country. It's kind of, for the last several months, it was kind of a Georgia-Tennessee battle. Now it's starting to look like all of a sudden an Alabama-Clemson battle after after trips to Tuscaloosa and to Clemson. So his recruitment's not over by any means, but it certainly looks like it's starting to shift towards an Alabama-Clemson battle, which is very interesting. You never know if it may stay that way because it's shifted so many times. But as of right now, it looks like Alabama Clemson fighting for the number one tight end in the country.
Interesting stuff, as always, from Bone. All right, Bone, let the listeners in on how they can get your info.
We follow us at BamaInsider.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Follow me on my Twitter handle at Andrew J. Bone. And go to YouTube, search Bama Insider, click subscribe to follow our YouTube channel.
Thanks, Bone. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Gary. See ya.